Hi, and welcome to Boise State in the Community. I'm your host, Joshua Swaner, and joining me today is the Professor of Astronomy in the Physics Department here at Boise State, Dr. Brian Jackson. It's nice to have you here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Now, what's your background before you came here to Boise State?
So I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and I attended Georgia Tech, got a physics bachelor's there, moved to the University of Arizona in Tucson, where I got a PhD in planetary science. And then after that, I moved to Greenbelt, Maryland, where I worked at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center as a research fellow. I moved from there to the Carnegie Department of Terrestrial Magnetism in Washington, D.C. as a research fellow, and then got hired on here in 2014.
Different people who have been in your classes and have come to your programs, are there any kind of common questions or recurring questions that you get?
Oh, we get all kinds of questions. One thing I hear a lot is people ask about aliens. Do I believe in aliens? Do I think there are aliens out there?
Yeah.
And it's such a great question because it really means people are thinking kind of outside the box. People are really curious about the universe in kind of a deep way. Astronomers are pretty optimistic about finding life elsewhere in the universe. Now, it may not be intelligent life. It may not be life that we can communicate with, but we're really hopeful that we will find some form of simple life probably within the next few decades. So usually I answer that question, yes, I think there are aliens out there.
Oh. And also, are there any kind of funny questions that kind of come to mind that you've gotten?
The best astronomy conversations I have are with younger kids. Mm-hmm. They tend not to ask questions. They like to tell me things that they know about astronomy. But I did have one kid, I think he was 9 years old, ask me about alien bones on Mars and whether we'd found bones on Mars. That was a little bit of a touchy question to answer.
Yeah.
Since he seemed very insistent that we had found bones.
That's pretty funny. You've also done work with Death Valley's racetrack playa. And also Martian dust devils. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so my background is in planetary science. So I study the sort of astronomy, physics, geology, and chemistry of planets, in general. And so that gives me kind of scope to pursue lots of different kinds of projects. So among the projects we've looked at are, we've studied the sliding stones of racetrack playa. Mm-hmm. If you want to learn more about that research, you can visit racetrackplaya.org. We were the first group to actually scientifically observe those rocks sliding along the playa surface, and we solved this sort of decades-long mystery of what moved the rocks around.
Yeah, because coming back to the aliens thing, that was a lot of people's theory on it, was, it's something supernatural, something we can't explain. And what was that like for you, kind of coming to that conclusion that, just finding what was actually going on with this phenomena?
Yeah, that was really, really gratifying. As I said, people had been studying the racetrack playa and its sliding stones for decades without a whole lot of luck. And no one had actually ever managed to record the rocks in motion. But our research group was the first one to do that. So that was hugely exciting. We got all this interest from around the world, media requests from just basically all over. People love it. People just love it.
Yeah, I bet. What about the Martian dust devils? What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, and so we have another research project that's ongoing right now to study dust devils here on the Earth as an analog for dust devils on Mars. So on Mars, dust devils are probably the primary source of dust for Mars's atmosphere. They inject a lot of dust into the atmosphere, but we actually don't understand how they work very well. We don't understand how exactly they lift the dust, how frequently dust devils occur on Mars. All of that is still kind of a mystery. And so we use dust devils here on the Earth, and particularly here in Idaho, to try to understand the physical mechanisms that power dust devils on Mars. So we have a funded research grant from the Idaho Space Grant Consortium to fund an effort this coming summer to actually fly an instrumented drone through a dust devil and actually make measurements inside the dust devil.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. Are there any difficulties with the atmosphere, of Earth compared to Mars, or even the gravity?
So of course there are important differences between the Earth and Mars. Mars's atmosphere is much, much thinner. The gravity is much, much lower. But a lot of the same physics applies. You can just take the equations that govern the physics of the dust devils and scale them appropriately so that what you learn here on the Earth can be used to understand Mars.
Wow, that's pretty awesome because I think that there might not be enough similarities to like accurately do that, but that's really fascinating. Like finding a way to do that. Now, with some of your programs that you've done, is it just you, or do you have any people help you out at all? Like any volunteers, maybe, or?
Well, I have collaborators for several of these projects. As I mentioned earlier, my friend Elizabeth Adams is one of our collaborators. I actually have a lot of students here at Boise State involved with these projects. So I have a student involved with the Dust Devil project that we just discussed. I also have students involved in the extrasolar planetary astronomy efforts that we have ongoing. So students here at Boise State and collaborators all over the world are involved in the research that we do.
That's pretty fascinating. Are there any incentives you give students, or how does that work?
In some cases, students get research course credit for working with me. We have some paid internships for students as well. Some students just volunteer. They really are interested in getting involved. Very often, even volunteer students, they can ask for recommendation letters after they've worked with me if they are applying to grad school or jobs or things like that. So there's lots of different ways for students to get involved and then sort of get some sort of compensation afterward.
Yeah, that's really cool. I also was able to go to the Teen Science Cafe that you conduct out in Caldwell. Now, like, how do you get started with that?
So I'm not in charge of the Teen Science Cafes. This is an effort that's been catalyzed by the group over in the Institute for STEM and Diversity Initiatives here at Boise State. Christine Chang is in charge of organizing these teen science cafes throughout the Treasure Valley, but she invited me to participate in some of them, and so I went out to the Caldwell Public Library like you saw, and I gave a science presentation to some of the teens there.
Wow, and is it funded through Boise State?
I don't think Boise State funds it.
Okay.
I think different local organizations fund it. So for example, the Caldwell Public Library event, that was funded by the Optimist Society there in Caldwell.
Oh, okay. All right. And the crowd, like with the stargazing night, you said there were a lot of older people, just kind of a mix of different age groups. How does that crowd differ from the crowd that was at the Teen Science Cafe?
Well, the Teen Science Cafe is an effort specifically geared toward teenagers. So we have, I think, older middle school students up to high school students that come to those events. Whereas our on-campus stargazing events, those are basically a broad cross-section of the community. So we have people who are 5 years old staying up late to do some stargazing, all the way up to probably 80-year-olds who are staying up late to do some stargazing. So it's a much broader range of folks who come to these stargazing events than come to the Teen Science Cafe.
Yeah. What's the kind of social dynamic with that? Like, is it a different kind of feel, just with the kids being there, or is it pretty similar?
I think when people start talking about astronomy, they all become young again. It doesn't matter how old you are. You get the same kinds of questions from 80-year-olds as you get from 8-year-olds. So yeah, people just love it, and I don't have a good sense for a different social dynamic between the different groups. Everyone just loves astronomy and science.
I understand we have a video of that. Is it okay if we take a look at that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. that was really awesome. I was actually able to go to one of your programs here, the Stargazing Night. Now, and you had a guest speaker there. Do you bring a lot of outside experts often?
That was my friend, Dr. Elizabeth Adams, who lives in Boston. She works for the Planetary Science Institute. We just began this program of monthly astronomy outreach events, and so this semester we didn't have a lot of guests come in, but we're going to continue that effort next semester. So first Friday of every month, starting in February, we're going to have a public outreach event at which we'll have an astronomy lecture and potentially stargazing. And for those programs, we're hoping to bring in people from all over the country.
You also mentioned some of your work in Boise State's Physics and Astronomy Club. What can you tell us about that?
So the Physics and Astronomy Club in the physics department is an undergraduate club. So it's for our students, but they don't just have to be physics majors. They can be any major on campus. And it's intended primarily to get students involved in physics and astronomy, either through research or just sort of general discussion with their classmates. They do a lot of public outreach as well, and so that's another nice conduit for the physics department to do public outreach. The Physics and Astronomy Club goes out to local elementary schools and does science demos for them. They also set up science demos when we have big crowds here on campus. So for example, we've participated in Bronco Day for the last year or two through the Physics and Astronomy Club. So yeah, they're active, kind of doing lots of different things, kind of outreach, education, lots of different stuff.
Wow. When did the club start?
Well, Boise State Physics had a Physics and Astronomy Club several years ago that petered out a bit. But when I was hired on, one of the charges I was given was to kind of revamp that club.
Yeah.
And so when I got here in 2014, I started reaching out just to the undergraduates in the physics major, trying to get people interested, drawing people into the club. And it's been going strong really ever since.
And about when did you get involved in it, like with your particular role in there? Like, was that recent, or have you been involved for a while?
I got involved right away. Just as I got here in 2014, I started recruiting students into the club, started sort of twisting some arms to get students to serve as officers, so really right from the beginning.
Wow. Is there any kind of crossover from the classes that you teach here at BSU into the community outreach programs, or is it kind of like two separate courses almost, you know?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as much as possible, I try to have kind of cross-pollination between the research and the teaching and the outreach. One way in which the classes cross over with the public outreach is the students in our intro astronomy class, they have to do a night observing lab. And so this year what we had was, we had the students do their night observing lab. We pulled the telescopes out, went out under the night sky, and we invited the public to that. So we had a public lecture, and then we had the public come to the night observing lab that the students were doing. So the students were doing their lab, the public was coming in, and they were all sort of co-mingling together, so it was really great.
Wow. And kind of like in regards to your classes, what kind of makes them stand apart from some of the other courses in the physics department?
I teach an intro astronomy class, the title of which is Life in the Universe. It's the only class, I'm pretty sure it's the only class on campus where we look at the origin of life on the Earth from an astronomical perspective and try to extrapolate from what we understand about the origin of life on Earth to where life might arise elsewhere in the universe. And so it's this kind of very interdisciplinary course where we study this sort of physics, astronomy, chemistry, and geology of Earth's history, how that contributed to the rise of life, and what that might mean about life elsewhere in the universe.
Wow. And you did mention that you worked in NASA. Has your experience there also had maybe any crossover into your programs or into your classes at all?
Yeah, my time at NASA was really amazing. I got to meet some really amazing people, work on some really neat projects. I would say primarily my experience at NASA, it taught me how to do public outreach in part. I actually had the official NASA media training while I was there, so that was a real help. It also just got me in touch with the space program here in the US in a very unique way. So I had to I got a sort of insider perspective on what NASA was like and what the space program is like. That's really helped me kind of talk about space and astronomy with the public. It helps give me a little street cred. You know, when you say you've worked at NASA, people get pretty excited and their ears perk up. Yeah, so it's kind of helped in a lot of ways with our public outreach efforts here at Boise State.
Yeah, definitely. I also hear word on the street that we're going to be having a solar eclipse at some point. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so there's going to be an historic total solar eclipse crossing over the continental United States, August 21st, 2017. So that turns out to be actually the first day of the fall semester next year. So it's going to be a really unique event. Turns out that the line of totality, the places on the surface of the Earth where you can see the moon completely block out the sun, that line of totality is going to pass right through Idaho.
Oh, wow.
And so you would, to see totality, you'd have to go just a little north of Boise. But even here in Boise, we're going to have a 99.5% total eclipse. So that morning at about 10:30, the moon will almost completely block out the sun as seen here in Boise. So if we weren't talking about this right now and people didn't hear about it from this TV show, they would know about it very soon.
Yeah.
When the sun basically disappeared from the sky on August 21st, 2017, they would know something was happening.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I don't remember any eclipses happening in my lifetime. Are they pretty rare?
Solar eclipses happen pretty frequently. It's just that they don't usually happen in a place that's visible from the land. So eclipses are usually only visible from, say, the ocean. And so it's very unusual to have an eclipse cross over such a large landmass the way this one is going to next year. So it presents a really unique opportunity. The last total solar eclipse to cross through the continental United States was back in 1979, so almost 38 years ago. That will be the last solar eclipse that anyone could have seen from the United States, the total solar eclipse that anyone could have seen. The next total solar eclipse is going to cross through the United States, 2169.
Wow.
So if you're alive now, this is the time to see the eclipse, because you're not going to get a chance to see the total solar eclipse again from the United States.
Oh, wow. That's pretty fantastic. Are you doing anything at all during the eclipse, or before or afterwards?
Yeah, so Boise State Physics, we've got lots of events that we're going to cook up. Tomorrow evening, December 2nd, 7:30, we're going to have our monthly astronomy public outreach event. And at that event, I'm going to give a talk about how to safely observe the solar eclipse. Very important, not to look directly at the sun at any point, even during the eclipse. That can be quite dangerous. But we'll talk at this event about how to observe it safely. And then throughout the year, we'll give a couple of other presentations to the public to let them know what they can do to observe the eclipse. So lots of events going forward this next year.
What are some of those things to be able to view it safely without burning your eyes out?
Well, I would recommend coming to my talk tomorrow night, but you can buy equipment online very cheaply, really, to observe the eclipse safely. There's very cheap ways to observe the eclipse safely, but it is important that people do not look directly at the sun during the eclipse. That can be quite dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. Now, is there anything else you'd like to say if someone watching today is interested in coming to one of your talks? Yeah,
absolutely. So if you visit my blog, my research blog, astrojack.com, you can click on the public outreach link, and there's an email sign up you can do there where you can get public event announcements that way. I update that blog fairly regularly with research and other sort of fun things that I find, so folks can follow me there. You can follow me on Twitter. There's a link to my Twitter handle from my website. So yeah, astrojack.com, that's the place to go.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure having you. Really fascinating. My name is Joshua Swaner. This has been Boise State in the Community. We'll see you next time.